My name is Adrian, and I used to work in my father's workshop. At first, his business was very successful, and we were even running out of space to store so many cars and motorcycles. However, competing businesses opened up, and we started doing so badly that I had to look for another job. Fortunately, since I've always been a fan of all vehicles, I had a license to drive all of them. This should have made it easier for a company to hire me, but unfortunately, my country was going through a crisis, and so I had to apply for jobs and send resumes for months. I would wake up as early as possible every day to visit the different businesses and see if they needed a worker. And one day, while I was changing a car's tires, my phone started to ring. My hands were covered in grease, and I usually put my phone in silent mode, so nobody would bother me while I'm busy. I don't know why, but at that moment, I didn't hesitate about picking up that call. As always, I was wearing some old clothes, so I cleaned my hands on my old shirt, put the screwdriver to the side, and stood up. I picked up. It was a company looking for a nighttime driver, and the job itself would be pretty tough. I had to drive a truck full of meat to 6 different cities and come back. And instead of having an 8-hour work shift, it would be 12 hours with a small break to eat. They would pay me so much for that job that I couldn't turn it down. My father's workshop was doing worse and worse, and I would sometimes not eat just so my parents could. I always felt it was my duty to help my family. I immediately accepted, and they explained to me that I would get started next Saturday. I would be practicing for 3 days with the company's trucker, who was about to retire, and after that, I would be driving completely alone. The day finally came, and I arrived right on time and well dressed in order to give a good first impression. But I soon realized that things weren't like that in that place. I waited for 45 minutes, completely alone, reclining on the truck. And that's when an old, fat, and very unkempt man arrived wearing a tank top filled with grease stains everywhere. The guy looked like a cartoon or movie character. When I shook his hand, his foul smell caught me by surprise, making me gag, which I managed to hide by pretending to cough. I told him to please give me a second since I had to make a call. I used that time to breathe fresh air for the last time and mentally prepare myself to spend 36 hours in a truck with that man and his foul smell. He yelled at me from inside the truck, demanding that I got in already since we were running later. I knew we would not get along well. What a shameless idiot. He not only made me wait for almost an hour, but now rushes me to get in, I thought to myself. But since I desperately needed the money, I put on a happy face and got in the truck. I asked him to please let me roll down the windows, and lied saying I would get dizzy, and overwhelmed if they were up. He then turned on the truck, and the engine sounded like it would explode at any moment. We set off and spent the entire night driving from highway to highway, doing a few stops to unload meat in some restaurants. And in one of those stops, we got off the truck to grab a bite to eat. He ordered 2 extra large hamburgers and a can of Coke, and spent that time giving me advice on how to make the job feel less long, including, quite ironically, eating healthy. We came back in the morning, and the sun was already up. I ended up getting used to his smell, and the old man ended up being pleasant enough as a person. It was time to go to sleep and prepare myself to spend another long night talking with him. This time, he only arrived 20 minutes late and started talking as soon as we set off. At first, he talked about dumb stuff with no importance, such as jokes and gossip typical from truck drivers. However, he then thought it would be funny to try to scare me by talking about paranormal events, which had happened to him while driving. You know, most people just think I'm crazy, but I don't think you'll take long to understand what I mean, he told me. The old man then spent the next 4 hours talking about some of the strangest things I've ever heard. According to him, seeing apparitions on the highway at night was pretty common. And that one day when he was driving, he felt how someone was tapping his shoulder. When he looked to his side, he saw on the shotgun seat the pale face of a woman, covered in blood, asking him if he could take her home. And although I don't believe any of his stories, at least they were entertaining. We then turned on the radio, and I was happy to discover that we both liked the same kind of music. That night was very pleasant. The last time we worked together, I felt I would miss the guy. Although not because I liked him a lot or anything, but because I would now be working completely alone. When we finished, we said our goodbyes, and he gave me the keys to the truck. I had learned the routes pretty well, and just in case I got lost, he left me a map. That was a nice gesture on his part. On my first day as a truck driver, the company gave me the order to take a small detour, since we had a new customer. I set off to follow the corresponding route and turned on the radio to try not to get bored. I was also mentally preparing myself to keep following this cycle of driving, stopping to wait for the contents to be unloaded and then driving more. Unfortunately, I was so relaxed that I forgot to take the detour to the new restaurant. I remembered 15 minutes too late, so I had to make a turn and look for an alternative route in the map the old man had given me. And I was so focused on finding another route that I wasn't paying much attention to the road, until I heard how something hit the truck. Scared, I hit the brakes. I didn't know what just happened. Did I run over an animal? Or maybe I just hit some other object lying in the middle of the road. I inhaled and exhaled, trying to calm my nerves, and opened the door. When I peeked out, I saw a woman thrown on the floor in the middle of the highway. I cursed the day I decided to accept this job. I approached her to help her, but she wasn't breathing. I couldn't do anything to help her, and fearing that I would be apprehended for femicide, I decided to get rid of the corpse. So I opened the back of the truck and threw her inside with all the meat. I had to find somewhere safe to get rid of her. The truck now had a broken light too due to the impact, so I had to make up an excuse for that as well. I decided to continue following the route until the next restaurant, but on the way I saw lights at the end of the highway. And as I got closer to them, I saw that I was approaching a police checkpoint. They were looking for a missing woman, and after showing them my papers, they demanded to see the contents of the truck. I was doomed. They would discover that I was carrying a corpse, and I would be arrested. But to my shock, when they verified the truck's container, the corpse was no longer there. They told me to keep going, and I could no longer understand what was going on. On one hand, I felt relieved, but on the other hand, it was impossible for that corpse to just have vanished. I finished the run after unloading all the orders, and I started driving back to my city. However, I suddenly noticed how someone started tapping my shoulder, and when I looked to the side, I saw the woman I ran over, covered in blood, with her gaze fixated on me. I hit the brakes and got off the truck. I then checked the entire vehicle, but I found nothing. Once I got back to the city, I checked the entire truck one last time, but there was no sign of the body. I thought that maybe it was all just some sort of hallucination, but the truck's light was still broken. And now, every night I'm much more alert than ever in order to avoid something unexplainable like that ever happening again. Every time I close my eyes, I remember perfectly the face of that woman. I remember every single detail of her face. And most of the dreams I have now are nightmares in which I relive that moment. That old man warned me that strange paranormal things happen frequently on the highway, and I didn't believe him. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it. And if you want to see more Draw My Life videos, subscribe to our channel. See you on the next episode.